So how in the world do you cast a 7-year-old? I've never casted a kid before. Now, of course, we're using horse reference to kind of get the nose shape. And that's really, really important because even though we're making a fantasy character, even though it's a unicorn, I still like to ground things in reality. All right, so for full disclosure, I am not a mold maker. Did you hear that? Let's roll that again. Yep, I cracked the mold. The process has been wild. And that's really what all of this is about at the end of the day. It's about transformation. Hi, my name is Adam Walls, and I'm an award-winning makeup artist. You may have seen my work in Disney's Noelle. Have you ever put a kid through a creature makeup before? Well, come along with me today on Off the Walls Effects. We're going to figure it out. Hey everyone, welcome back to Off the Walls Effects. So for my last episode, I went through a group called the Scene Makers Collective, but a bunch of you had some questions specifically about the unicorn makeup that I did. So today, that's what we're going to do. I'm going to go through that entire process. We're going to go through life casting and molding and running and sculpting and applying and applying and applying. So this whole makeup started out as a Halloween concept by my daughter. She came to me and she had two requirements. Number one, she wanted to wear a whole bunch of makeup. And number two, she wanted to be a unicorn. Now, as a parent, I've always wanted my kids to have a healthy relationship with makeup. I mean, hell, they see it around the house all day long, every day. But I never wanted her growing up feeling that she needed it. I mean, I'm sure you've heard it, but you've always heard people say, oh, I need to put my face on. And that's heartbreaking to me because I follow the logic. What's wrong with your actual face? And even if that's not an outward thought, it's a subconscious one. And I didn't want my kids growing up with that ideal. Makeup should be fun, expressive, and creative. And as a makeup artist, that's how I use it, to make characters. So I asked her, do you want to be a human hybrid unicorn? And she gave me a resounding yes, and added, in fact, I want to be a rock and roll unicorn. Now that's a great idea. So how in the world do you cast a 7-year-old? I've never casted a kid before. I mean, even seasoned actors struggle through the process sometimes. So what we decided to do is, because the prosthetic was going to end on this upper lip, I wouldn't need any of this mouth detail. And the most important part was that nose. So instead of keeping the nose open like you would normally do with a life cast, we decided to cast her entire face, close off her nose, but keep her mouth open. And this did two things for us. Number one, it made sure that we captured all this nose detail perfectly. And then number two, it allowed her to keep talking through the life casting process. My daughter is a very vocal kid, and that's a stress relief for her. So because we were putting her under the silicone, I knew for a fact that being able to talk through the process and her be able to express herself to us while she's going through it would really help to calm her nerves down and allow us to put her through that life casting process effectively. So once we got a positive from that casting, it was time to start sculpting. Now, because I'm a planner, I always try to go in first with some sort of rough idea in my head of what I'm trying to capture. And so what we came up with was this. Now, it's a very rough, cartoony sketch, but I definitely got her input on it. Her big thing was she really wanted a tattoo on the side of her head. So she took over the design process for that tattoo and did it herself. And as always, the design evolved as we started sculpting the makeup. Now, of course, we're using horse reference to kind of get the nose shape. And that's really, really important because even though we're making a fantasy character, even though it's a unicorn, I still like to ground things in reality. I think some of the most effective makeups out there are grounded in reality, even if it is a crazy fantasy character. Having a handful of references of horses on hand really helped us kind of dial in that look to get us to where we needed to be. Now, of course, going through this video, I've gone back and I've looked at a lot of those old sculpting pictures that I did, and I like the overall form, but Adam, come on, man, what's up with that texture? You can see where I've taken the sculpting tool and I've punched in every single little pore. I didn't break it up. It's not pore going into pore. Your skin texture should have this wave. If you have smooth bits between each one of your pores, you haven't done your skin texture right. So I usually go back over it again and again and again. And maybe at one point we'll do this again, but for now, we're kind of stuck with that old sculpture. And like I always say, you learn by doing, and I definitely learned a few things on this one. And now for the horn. So think about it. How do horns grow in real life? And think about that stereotypical unicorn horn that you've seen. There's always a spiral pattern to that, right? So our thought in handling the horn is, what if the horn has spiraled out of the forehead? What if it's pulling the skin with it a little bit? What if that's how that magical horn emits from the head of our human hybrid unicorn? So that's what we did with our sculpture. We tried to give that swirl to the skin a little bit to motivate that swirl pattern that you usually see in a unicorn horn. And of course, I didn't want it to just be a uniform spiral that was perfect. I wanted to give it a little bit more of a natural horn texture. So it's not exactly even. It doesn't exactly come to a point. There's a little crook, a little bend in the end of it. But I really wanted that to be there to make it feel a little bit more natural. All right, so for full disclosure, I am not a mold maker. There are artists out there that spend their entire career perfecting this art. There are molds out there that do look like a piece of art. They're clean lines, they're crisp, they fit together perfectly. Mine, not so much. So to give you an idea, these are what my molds look like. And you can get in there and you can see it's not exactly even. It's a little funky looking. The lines aren't necessarily as crisp as they should be. But, you know, with a mold, this isn't the final product. This isn't what you're going to be showing off at the end of the day. It's going to be the prosthetic. So in my mind, if it pulls a clean piece, I'm a happy camper. That's the important part. So the horn itself needed to be lightweight, it needed to be backlit, and it needed to be attached to the forehead in some sort of way that was easy to put on and take off. Especially when you think about that prosthetic going on. You want to make sure that that horn is the last thing that can go on. So what I ended up with was a 2-part clear polyester resin that I actually tinted a little bit to give it this nice little pink lavender color. And in order to get the LEDs inside of this horn, we had to make sure that we had an area to access the inside. So what we did is I sculpted a tiny little platform piece. This is the piece that gets attached to the forehead that the horn slides onto. And that's essentially how it attached. I did put a little bit of layer of glue down here, and I taped it to the forehead with some opsite tape that allowed it to hold perfectly. But of course, the other trick about this is you still have to have LEDs in this. So it's a little bit of a rig, and there are definitely better ways to do this, but here is my LED lighting system, which is essentially 2 LEDs with a bunch of wires attached. So essentially what I had to do is I had to make sure that that top LED fit into this, and it took a little bit of finagling. I already had this hole drilled out on the inside of this horn, so I definitely had room for the LED. What I didn't have room for were the wires, and especially the wires to work around this post. So if you look very closely on this horn, there are 2 smaller slots that would take these 2 wires. And when I would do it on the day, this would get glued down first, and the wires would get attached to it accordingly. I taped those into place and make sure that it was a nice firm fit. And once this whole unit was together, then the horn was the last step. After painting and everything else, the horn would get slid on top. Now my mold for this horn is not a great mold. It was very rough. I believe I just poured this into a cup, which is why it has this shape. And essentially just stood the horn up on the inside. And what I got was my mold. Like I said, it's a very rough mold. It didn't need to be pretty. Again, not a mold maker. But it's effective, and I got my horn out, and it did exactly what I needed it to do. Now, the other key part about this makeup was hair. Now, I really needed a wig that was going to give this character an edge. I mean, as you can see in my original design, we even had it as a mohawk. Maybe that was a little too extreme, so my wife ended up finding this awful Halloween wig that I think was part of a Lego Movie 2 costume. And she found that at the store and brought it home, and I thought it would work fairly well. And this is what we ended up with. So we managed to take the wig, hack it right down the center to give us that half-buzzed look that we were kind of going for. And again, it's not a great wig. Once we pulled those ponytails out of the original design, there were a lot of open areas on the underside. It's very thin to the point where you can see the mesh that they kind of put everything underneath. It's almost like the character's got thinning hair or something. So what we ended up doing is we ended up trying to tuck as much of this back as we could to cover all of that. And because we had this nice firm strip up here, this is essentially what we glued along the top of the head. The other nice thing about this is this became key for hiding our 9-volt battery that was required to run the LEDs that were in the horn. And because those wires came out of the top of the prosthetic, you're going to get a little bump right up here where that wire is going to go. Of course, you don't want that. So this became really key in hiding that, and just rotated that widow's peak of this wig just down enough to kind of line up right in this area to cover that bump. So in the end, we cut it up, we styled it, boom, rock and roll unicorn ready to roll. So we ran the prosthetic out of Plat Seal Gel 10 and we deadened it at about 80%. And if you're not familiar with what that term is, deadener is a component that you can add to your silicone to make your silicone as soft or as rigid as you need it to be. It's what makes cheeks squishy and ears firm. You can't achieve that without Smith's Theatrical Deadener. And so if you're running prosthetics at home, or if you're creating anything like this, this is what you need. This is my little effects book. So every time I come up with a new color combination, every time I add different components, or I play with how much I deaden the silicone, every single run I've ever done is in this notebook. So I can actually go through this notebook and go back and see my notes from when I ran this the last time. And I believe what I put on here is too transparent, needs more white oil paint. Yeah, will do. Thanks 2021 Adam. So because of our formula, into the silicone goes our deadener, goes in our oil paints, and goes in our flocking, and then into the evacuator to kind of pull all those gases out. After I got the silicone evacuated and the mold poured up, as I was closing it, this happened. Did you hear that? Let's roll that again. Yep, I cracked the mold. There was not enough strength along this edge to clamp it down the way I did. So essentially what I did is I cracked, and you can see the hairline cracks right here along the mold. You can see the cracks up in here. You can even see it on the inside, on where it cracked on the inside of the mold. Now, I got very, very lucky, and it did not go into the detail of the mold, so my sculpture was still fine. And when I demolded this, the prosthetic did come out. But this again is another example of why I'm not a mold maker, because I didn't make this as strong as I probably need to. I also didn't clamp it down in the right way. You notice that I was trying to pull the clamp and catch this edge here to clamp it in place. What I should have done, and what I did eventually do on that day, is I needed a board on the bottom and a board on the top to make sure that I was pushing my positive down correctly into the mold. So if I have all of my pressure here and all of my pressure here, and I push those two things together and I don't touch this rim at all, I'm in a good spot. So what you do is you have a board that's a little bit wider than your mold itself down here, and another board that just pushes right here. And as long as those two things are clamped together, board out this way, board here, clamp out here, and as long as it's just pushing here, and this is where all the pressure is, and this is where all the pressure is, you should be good. So this is my bit of advice for your molds. Remember to take care of these, because that's the only thing that you have left of that original sculpture. So in total, I've actually applied this makeup 3 times now. The first time was in 2020, and we covered the bald cap with packs like you usually do. And then I decided to use white aqua color as a quick and easy base to put all the rest of my airbrush colors over top. Now, here's the problem with that. I didn't think it through. We do have that tattoo that's going to go on the side of the head. And tattoos are released with water, and aqua color is activated with water. Uh-oh. I had a really hard time in getting that tattoo to come off of the transfer paper. And in fact, I had a couple holes that I had to go in with the tattoo pen later to fill in. Always keep in mind how those materials are going to work together so you don't screw yourself later. So for our second application, we did make a couple small changes. Obviously, I didn't use aqua color over top of that PAX on top. And if you notice on the ears, I actually added a little bit of red to the tips of the ears. When I did it the first time, the ears were totally flat and they were dead. I didn't add any dimension. I think I painted them white and slapped them on. It was Halloween, go out trick-or-treating, have fun. But for the second time, I definitely added a little bit of red to the tips of those ears, which really brought a whole lot of life into them. One of the other things my daughter really wanted to do was she wanted to have a couple piercings for it. So again, they're foam latex ears. You could just punch right through those things with those piercings. So that added a lot more character to that ear on the side that was exposed. Now, the whole reason we did this makeup the second time is because our little town does a Halloween contest every year. And in 2020, everything was shut down. So that year it was canceled. So the next year when it came back around, my daughter was like, we're going to enter this thing, Dad, and we're going to win. And I was like, hold your horses. Wait for a second. You don't know that you're going to win. I mean, I appreciate the vote of confidence. I really do. But you don't know who's going to show up there. So that's what we did. We went ahead and applied the makeup. We showed up at the event. She was on stage, horn all aglow. She was very, very excited. And apparently, as my daughter told me, as the judge walked by her, the judge looked at her costume and said, oh, she just bought that at a store. You know, to this day, I can't really tell if that's a compliment or an insult. But, you know, opinions are like assholes. Everyone's got one. You know what? She didn't win. But most importantly, life lesson learned. So this time we did it right. We went ahead and got a wig cap, put that on. After we bald capped her, we took care of any funky edges in the back with an occipital foam latex piece. My daughter decided on a new color scheme. She wanted a little bit more edge to the makeup, so decided to bring in some more spots to really kind of play with the color scheme. A little less pink, a little more edge. And so because of that, we jumped into Procreate this time to give it that new color scheme. And so you could just think, sure, black spots, that's easy, we'll just do that on the day. But here's the thing I realized when I started jumping into Procreate. The moment I started bringing some of that dark breakup, those black spots into area, I started realizing that I was giving her a 5 o'clock shadow and it looked like I was trying to paint a beard on. Now think about that. If I did that on the day, we'd have been dead in the water. I would have screwed the whole thing up. So thank God I did that Procreate. And again, that goes back to plan, plan, plan. Do your homework, have a plan, go into it. That way you know everything that you can when tackling something like this. One of the big differences this go around is she's a teenager now. She's not that 8, 9-year-old kid that we were putting this on before. Her face has elongated as she has aged. So it didn't quite fit the way that we were used to, and it was a lot tighter on her face. Silicone doesn't stretch as much as foam does. It can stretch some, and we got it to stretch just enough. Again, because there was a lot of area on the nose that we could play with, the nose got cheated up just a little bit. That lip still covered her face, and I made sure that we still covered her brows and her eyes. So you kind of found yourself giving it a little bit of a stretch to fit. And if you got in there really close on that nose, you'd notice that the nostrils didn't line up with her nostrils anymore. The nostrils were almost up here. So she couldn't breathe too great out of her nose that night, but she's a trooper and rolled with it. You know, if we gave this makeup another year, I don't think we'd be able to get it to fit. And after that was all set, we took that 9-volt battery, taped it to the side of her head, and put that wig down. The moment we attached those wires, that horn was aglow. That makeup was a blast. We had so much fun doing it. I had a lot of fun watching her walk around and talk to families. She even spent some time talking to kids, trying to convince them that, no, she was a real unicorn. Always a character, that one. So at this point, I know friends and folks that know me are probably sick of hearing about this makeup. But honestly, this will be one of my favorites. It was a great father-daughter bonding moment to go through this creative, collaborative process together. Watching her grow with this character has been absolutely fascinating. It's been fun to watch her go through being that peppy, cute kid who was into the magical aspect of the character, to now seeing her really lean into that grunge, teenage rock and roll style character. The process has been wild. And that's really what all of this is about at the end of the day. It's about transformation. I remember after removing Regé-Jean Page from his old age makeup and roots for the very last time, and he told me, wow, now's the hard part. Now I have to act while looking like me. That always stuck with me. So what about you? Would you ever build a character like this? Definitely let me know in the comments down below. And of course, if you liked the video, give it a like, subscribe to the channel so you can keep updated on everything as it all comes through. And like I always say, keep making cool stuff.